A Texas-born man built a Caribbean banking empire from nothing. He sponsored the most expensive cricket match ever played in history. He collected knighthoods and dined with prime ministers across the Caribbean. He ran the second-largest Ponzi scheme in American history, discovered in the same year as Bernie Madoff's collapse, 2009. His offshore bank's claimed assets existed almost entirely in his imagination. He is currently serving 110 years in a federal prison. He never showed any remorse. He maintains his innocence to this day. Let's rewind. Robert Allen Stanford was born in 1950 in Mexia, Texas, a small town of just a few thousand people in central Texas. He grew up with a grandfather who had built a modest insurance business. The Stanford family name carried some local respect, but no great wealth. Allen Stanford attended Baylor University, studying business and finance. He was ambitious, physically large, and extremely confident from an early age. He tried several businesses in Texas through the 1970s and 1980s. None of them became anything particularly significant or successful. Then, in 1985, his father handed him a small insurance company in Montserrat. Montserrat, a tiny British overseas territory in the Eastern Caribbean. The company was called Guardian International Bank. Tiny, almost irrelevant. Stanford saw in it something much larger than what it actually was. Stanford relocated the bank to Antigua in 1990 and renamed it Stanford International Bank, a name that sounded genuinely global and substantial. Antigua was a favorable choice for a specific and important regulatory reason. Offshore banking regulation in Antigua was significantly lighter than in the United States. Offshore banks in places like Antigua were not subject to the same oversight. Stanford International Bank's primary product was certificates of deposit, CDs, a standard financial product where you deposit money for a fixed return. Stanford's CDs offered interest rates dramatically higher than any comparable product. While U.S. banks offered around 3 to 4%, Stanford offered 10 to 15%. He explained the high returns by claiming a secret, proprietary investment strategy, a diversified portfolio managed by a team of expert advisors he personally supervised. The portfolio was supposedly invested in stable, carefully selected assets worldwide. In reality, the portfolio was largely fictional, and the returns were largely fabricated. Stanford himself controlled the bank's finances personally and almost exclusively. No genuinely independent audit of the actual investment portfolio ever occurred. The bank's auditor was a tiny, two-person accounting firm in Antigua, auditing a bank that claimed to hold billions of dollars in global assets. This should have been an obvious red flag. It was largely ignored for years. New depositor money was used to pay the returns promised to earlier depositors. The textbook definition of a Ponzi scheme, running in broad daylight. The bank grew steadily through the 1990s and accelerated through the 2000s. Stanford expanded aggressively into the United States financial market, establishing Stanford Financial Group with offices in multiple major American cities. American financial advisors were recruited and paid handsomely to sell the CDs. The commission structure was extremely generous, far above industry standard. Advisors earned more selling Stanford CDs than almost anything else available. This created a powerful, self-interested sales force across the United States. Many of those advisors genuinely believed the product was legitimate. The scheme attracted an estimated 28,000 investors across more than 100 countries. Many of them were retirees who placed their entire life savings in the CDs. By 2008, the bank claimed to hold approximately $7.2 billion in assets. Most of that money either didn't exist or had been spent by Stanford personally. Stanford spent extravagantly and relentlessly on his own personal lifestyle, multiple luxury yachts, a private airline, properties across the Caribbean and beyond, a personal museum on Antigua displaying artifacts he claimed to own. and an increasingly ambitious and theatrical public persona to maintain. Stanford's most spectacular and most bizarre venture was cricket. He had no particular prior connection to cricket. It was a business decision. Cricket was, and is, the dominant sport across the Caribbean islands. Whoever sponsored cricket in the Caribbean had automatic credibility and goodwill. Stanford poured money into Caribbean cricket, sponsoring stadiums, tournaments. He built an entire cricket stadium in Antigua, named after himself. In 2008, he organized what he called the Super Series match, a single 2020 cricket match. Stanford's Caribbean All-Stars versus England. The prize for winning, $20 million in cash. The entire team sharing it equally. $20 million for a single cricket match. Nothing like it had ever existed. Stanford arrived at the match by helicopter, landing dramatically on the outfield. He was photographed sitting in the stands with female members of the England team's families. The photos caused immediate and significant controversy in the English cricket world. The Caribbean team won. Players received $1 million each. Stanford displayed a glass case on the field containing the $20 million in cash, a physical, visible, theatrical pile of money on a cricket pitch in Antigua. It was the perfect visual metaphor for everything Stanford had built. Enormous, theatrical, and built on money that was not really his to spend. Stanford had cultivated political relationships across the Caribbean for years, donating generously to political parties and government-connected causes. In Antigua, the relationship between Stanford and the government was exceptionally close. His bank was one of the largest employers on the entire island. His economic footprint gave him political protection few could challenge directly. In 2006, Antigua awarded Stanford a knighthood. He became Sir Allen Stanford. He wore the title with visible pride and used it extensively in his marketing. He was also awarded honorary knighthoods from other Caribbean nations. A knighthood is a powerful credibility signal to investors and regulators alike. If Caribbean governments trusted him enough to knight him, surely the bank was real. This is called halo effect, and it worked for years. Meanwhile, regulators in the United States had been raising concerns. The SEC had in fact investigated Stanford multiple times across many years. Each time, they had closed the investigation without taking decisive action. In late 2008, the Madoff Ponzi scheme collapsed spectacularly. The Madoff scandal immediately focused regulatory attention on offshore banking and on the specific question of unusually high investment returns. Stanford CDs, with their 10 to 15% returns, suddenly attracted hard questions. In February 2009, the SEC filed an emergency civil action against Stanford, accusing him of a massive ongoing fraud and immediately freezing his assets. Stanford was in the Caribbean when the charges were filed against him. He did not flee immediately. He remained in the United States area. Investigators discovered the claimed $7.2 billion portfolio was almost entirely fictitious. Real assets amounted to a fraction of what depositors had been told existed. Approximately $7 billion of claimed assets simply did not exist in any form. The money had been consumed by Stanford's personal lifestyle and the Ponzi payments. Stanford was arrested by the FBI on June 18, 2009. He was charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, and obstruction of justice, and money laundering, and multiple counts of securities fraud. His co-conspirators included his chief financial officer, James Davis. Davis pleaded guilty and cooperated extensively with federal prosecutors. Davis became the government's primary witness at Stanford's eventual trial. Stanford's trial was delayed for years due to his mental health and medical issues, including a prison assault that he suffered in 2009 while awaiting trial. The trial finally began in January 2012 in Houston, Texas. Stanford maintained throughout that he was innocent and had been wrongly charged. He was convicted on 13 of the 14 counts against him. In June 2012, he was sentenced to 110 years in federal prison. The judge described his conduct as extraordinarily evil, manipulative, and deceitful. Antigua revoked his knighthood following the conviction. The 28,000 victims recovered only a small fraction of their deposited money. Many retirees lost everything they had spent their entire working lives saving. The Stanford fraud shares important characteristics with Madoff's scheme. Both promised consistent, above-market returns that should have seemed impossible. Both used credibility signals to deflect questions, legitimacy as a shield. Both were investigated multiple times before being stopped. Both times, too late. Stanford added one element Madoff didn't have: theatrical physical spectacle. The $20 million cricket match, the helicopter landing, the cash in the glass case. Spectacle is itself a form of credibility signal. If someone can afford to give away $20 million at a cricket match, surely they must have far more than $20 million available and secure. The $20 million being given away was itself largely funded by the fraud. The credibility was purchased with the very money it was designed to attract more of. A billionaire who was not actually a billionaire, spending like one to become believed as one. He is currently serving 110 years in the Federal Medical Center in Coleman, Florida. He will be 173 years old before his sentence is complete. Let that sit.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more finance disasters, market crashes, and billion-dollar mistakes that changed history. The next one is even crazier.